Hello everybody, I am Dr. Lakshman Kanal, faculty in the Department of Anatomy in BPKSS. I hope all of you are fine in this time of pandemic. At the continuation of the classes of the anatomy, today we are going to discuss about the histology of the urinary system. In this topic, we are going to see about the microscopic anatomy of all the components that forms the urinary system. The urinary system, the name itself says that urinary system means the system, body system, which is dedicated for the formation of the urine. Not only formation, it forms the urine, it stores the urine, and it excretes the urine. Besides the function of forming the urine, it has many other functions. Urinary system comprises of pair of kidney lying in the posterior body wall, then a pair of ureter that is arise from the medial border of the kidney, and the ureter runs in the posterior body wall downwards, and in the pelvic cavity there is the organ which is responsible for the storage of the urine, that is the ureter. Urinary bladder, and from the urinary bladder there is the urethra, which is helpful for the excretion of the urine outside of the body. So the most important function of the urinary system is formation of the urine, storage of the urine, and excretion of the urine. Besides this, the urinary system has very important function for the regulation of the blood volume, and it has other few endocrine functions like renin secretions, erythropoietin secretions, and vitamin D synthesis. The process of vitamin D synthesis also occurs in other organ, but one of the steps occurs in the kidney. So first of all, we are going to see about the kidney, and this is the macroscopic view or macroscopic diagram of the kidney. The kidney actually consists of kidney proper or kidney parenchyma and renal sinus. Kidney parenchyma is all the region of the kidney which has different components of the nephrons. We are going to discuss about the nephrons later. And renal sinus is the medial part of the kidney, these regions, where this renal parenchyma is absent, but there is the presence of this excretory duct system and fat, renal fat, different lymphatics, blood vessels, and all the other contents are located in this renal sinus. So this is the potential space, and this remaining thing is the kidney proper. And this kidney proper is also divided into outer region is called as the cortex, which is toward the renal capsules, and inner region, this region is the renal medulla. This renal medulla is constituted by this pyramidal shaped structure. These are called as the renal pyramid, and this pyramid are formed by actually the inside of this pyramid you will see that these are occupied by the nephrons, renal tubules. And the cortex regions is consist of cortical arch and renal column. So when the urine is formed in the renal tubules, that urine is first collected at the tip of this renal pyramid. This renal pyramid is also called as papilla. So at the tip of the papilla, the urine is first poured upon. So this region is called as the minor calyx. So minor calyx are located in the renal sinus region, and there are many renal minor calyces. So there is one minor calyces. This is another one. Here is another one. So minor calyces combine and they form the major calyces. So this 1, 2, and 3, this forms the major calyces, and major calyces form join and form the renal pelvis. And renal pelvis is the site from where the ureter rises, and the urine formed is progress downwards. Let's talk about the cortex, renal cortex. The renal cortex, the part of the renal cortex which is lying between the base of this renal pyramid and this renal capsule, this region is called as the cortical arch. This is the cortical arch region, and the part of the cortex which is lying between the two pyramids, this region is called the renal column. There is one term called as the lobe of the kidney. What is the lobe of the kidney? This term is important because when we discuss about the blood supply of the kidney, we name one of the artery as the lobar artery. So what is the lobe of the kidney? Lobe of the kidney is this region. this region. So if you see this region is formed by one pyramid, and this region called as the cortical arch, this region, and one half of this renal column, each half of the renal column, this constitutes the one lobe of the kidney. This is the diagram showing the tip of the renal pyramid. Here you can see tip of the renal pyramid, and this is the histological section. So if you see the tip of the renal pyramid histological sections, so this region must be the minor calyces, and this is the region where the urine that is formed in the renal tubules is poured open. So these are the distal portion of the collecting duct in the renal pyramid, through which the urine that is forming in the renal tubules comes to this space in the minor calyces, and through the major calyces and renal pelvis it goes to the ureter. If you see the macroscopic view of this renal pyramid, the tip of the renal pyramid, you will see small pores in this region. So that's why this area is called as this area where the small pores are there. This is called as area cribrosa. Cribrosa means sieve-like appearance. So that's why the name is area cribrosa. Here you can see the epithelial lining of minor calyces, that is the transitional epithelium. This term transitional epithelium must be remembered because this is the key epithelium of the urinary system beyond the collecting duct. Because up to the collecting duct, we'll see later that the epithelium lining is different, but beyond the collecting duct, from the minor calyces to the major calyx, pelvis, ureter, urinary bladder, and up to the part of the urethra, the lining epithelium is transitional epithelium. Here you can see this is the section of the kidney showing the different cortex and medulla. We are going to see this region is cortex and this region is medulla, and this is the tip of the medulla where this distal portion of the collecting duct opens. This distal portion of the collecting duct also called as the papillary duct because it opens at the region of the papilla. So let's see about the vascular supply of the kidney. We are not going to discuss about the detail about the renal artery, but we will follow the renal artery to some extent. Renal artery arises from the abdominal aorta, and at the medial border of the kidney, where we call the hilum of the kidney, they divide into first of all anterior and posterior divisions, and again into the different segmental divisions. And these segmental divisions finally give rise to the separate vessels or separate branch for the each lobe of the kidney, and that's why the name is first of all renal artery, then segmental artery, then from the segmental artery comes the lobar artery. The lobar artery is for the lobe of the kidney, which we just discussed. So if I put the sequence of the artery, so this will be the lobar artery, which bifurcate into the interlobar artery. Here you can see the bifurcation between the two lobes. And this, if you follow the one of the interlobar artery, it again bifurcates into the two arc-shaped artery. That's why the name is arcuate artery. An arcuate artery gives straight vessel toward the cortex regions, and they are called as the interlobular artery. It's not interlobar, interlobular artery. And from the interlobular artery, they give the efferent arterioles for the renal corpuscle. The cortex is reach of the renal corpuscle. So this is the one of the renal corpuscle I am going to show you. We'll discuss about this later, but till now, for this time, you know that this is constituted by the Bowman's capsule and different capillaries. So these efferent arterioles actually divide and they form the capillaries. These are called as the glomerulocapillaries. And from the glomerulocapillaries, efferent arteriole arises. So we are going to follow this efferent arteriole in next diagram. So up to now, we know that renal cortex is made up of renal corpuscle, and which is continued as a different tubules like proximal convoluted tubules, distal convoluted tubules, collecting tubules, which combinedly we call this as the nephrons, which are the functional and structural unit of the kidney, and each kidney consists of about 1 to 1.5 millions of the nephrons. And finally they form the collecting duct, which open into the tip of the renal pyramid, and cortex is the reach of the vascular supply. In this diagram, let's see what are the components of the nephron that lies in the cortex and in the medulla. So this part is the cortex and this pyramidal region is the medulla. So let's put two renal corpuscle here. The renal corpuscle means Bowman's capsule plus glomerulocapillaries, So this is the afferent arteriole divided into glomerular capillaries, and this is the efferent arteriole. We just see how this form through the renal artery. So I am going to form one on the renal tubules. So this is the continuation of the Bowman's capsule as the proximal convoluted tubules. Then there is the loop of Henle and distal convoluted tubules, and last part is collecting tubules. So here is the another nephrons, and these collecting tubules of the few nephrons, they join with each other, and many other collecting tubule joins, and finally they form this papillary duct, which we call a distal portion of the collecting duct from the papillary duct, and it open at the tip of the renal pyramid, and from here it is received by the minor calyces and then go to the major calyces and renal pelvis. So let's put the vascular component that are continued as the efferent arterioles. This is the efferent arteriole region. If this efferent arteriole region, this is, and efferent arterioles again divide into capillaries. The capillaries are lying along with this proximal convoluted tubule region. So these capillaries are called as peritubular capillaries. Peritubular capillaries because they are in the vicinity of these tubular structures, and they continue as a straight capillaries. These straight capillaries which form the loop which is parallel with the loop of the Henle. So these are called as the vasa recta. Vasa recta. So here also similar type of loop of Henle will be formed. If you see this nephron and this nephron, you can see that this nephron has long loop of Henle and similarly long loop of the vasa recta. But while this has the shorter loop of Henle, only the tip of the loop of Henle is lying in the medullary regions. While in this case, the loop of Henle, most of the loop of Henle lying in the medullary regions. So that's why the nephrons or renal corpuscles, you can say, these are divided into two parts or two types. You can say this is the cortical nephrons. These are called as the cortical nephrons, and these are called as juxtamedullary nephrons. What they call? Juxtamedullary nephrons. Juxtamedullary means in the side of the medulla, so they are nearer to the medulla. This renal corpuscle, you can see this is very near to the base of the medulla. That's why this is called as juxtamedullary nephrons, and this is called as the cortical nephrons. So most of the nephrons, you can see here also, most of the nephrons are cortical nephrons. About 85% of the nephrons are cortical nephrons, while only the 15% of the nephrons are juxtamedullary nephrons. So these juxtamedullary nephrons have the difference is they are long loop of Henle. The position is another difference, and functional difference is also there. This long loop of Henle are very much important to maintain the hyperosmolarity in this medullary regions. So the osmolarity of the interstitium in this region gradually increases at the tip of the medulla, and this is possible only by the joint function of this long loop of Henle and the vasa recta that runs parallel with this. So how this is possible, that is the topic of the physiology. So you can consult the physiology books to know the physiology behind this maintenance of osmolarity. But what I am going to say you that this hyperosmolarity is very much helpful for concentrating the urine. So that is the importance of this juxtamedullary nephron. Here again, you can see the two types of nephrons, juxtamedullary nephrons and cortical nephrons with long and short loop of Henle. And you can revise the parts of these nephrons. So this is the renal corpuscle. Then this is the proximal convoluted tubules, loop of Henle, distal convoluted tubules, and collecting tubules. And this is the tip of the pyramid. This is the histological diagram of the renal corpuscle. Renal corpuscle means Bowman capsule plus glomerulus. What is glomerulus? Glomerulus is the capillaries formed by the efferent arterioles inside the Bowman capsules. So if you see the histological image of the Bowman's capsule, renal corpuscle, you will see something like this. So this is the region where the efferent arterioles comes and efferent arteriole leave. And when it leaves as the efferent arteriole, before it leaves as the efferent arteriole, it gives many capillaries here. So that's why this region is called the vascular pole. And here is the one potential space. The space is formed between the two layers of the Bowman's capsule. The inner layer is this layer which covers the capillaries, and this layer is called as the visceral layers. And this layer, outer layer, which is lying outside of this space, this is called the parietal layer of the Bowman capsule. The space between visceral and parietal layer, this space is called as the urinary space. The blood is filtered by these glomerular capillaries, and that filtered product comes to this urinary space, which is processed further in the different renal tubules. So this region, these opposite regions of the vascular pole, this region is called the urinary pole. This pole is urinary pole, through which proximal convoluted tubule continue. So the important thing you have to know is that the glomerular capillaries are lined by the visceral layer of the Bowman's capsule, and this visceral layer constituted by the podocytes. So remember this cell, podocyte, the name is podocyte, podo means feet, so it has something like the fingers process, that's why it is called the podocyte. So let's see this diagram again. This is the vascular pole, the afferent arteriole is here, efferent is here, and these are the capillaries, glomerular capillaries, and lined by visceral layer of the Bowman's capsule, which is formed by the podocyte. These are the nucleus of the podocyte, and you can see small processes. These are called as the foot process of the podocytes. And this is the parietal layer of this Bowman's capsule, which is formed by the flat type of squamous type of cell. And this is the renal pole, urinary pole, and this is where the proximal convoluted tubule continue. If you see the diameter of the afferent and efferent arteriole, you will see that afferent arteriole is much greater in diameter than the efferent. The importance is that this difference creates the hydrostatic pressure difference, and which is helpful for the filtration of the blood in the urinary space. So if you see the capillary here, this is the only showing the capillaries, which is covered by podocyte, as I previously told, and this signifies the RBC, which is flowing inside the lumen of the capillaries. So the capillaries are lined by endothelial cell. You know, the endothelium is the cell which lines the capillaries. The feature of the endothelial cell in this glomerular capillary is that they contain small pores in the capillaries, which are helpful for the filtration. So in this slide, we are going to see about what is the barrier or filtration barrier through which blood has to pass before it forms the glomerular filtrate. So initially blood is lying in this lumen of the capillaries. This is the innermost region of the capillaries. As I previously told, it is lined by endothelial cell which contain small pores. This is called as the fenestration. So first of all, blood has to pass through this fenestration. These are called as the fenestration of the endothelial cell. The size of which is about 70 to 90 nanometers. Then these endothelial cell rest on the basement membrane. This is the basement membrane, which is also shared by the podocyte cells. So this is the basement membrane, chiefly formed by the type for collagen. This glomerular basement membrane is very important clinically, so we are going to see detail about this membrane later. And outside of this capillaries or basement membrane, the cell are the podocytes. This is the large nucleus of the podocytes, and these are the foot process. The large foot process are called as the primary foot process, which again give smaller foot process called as the secondary foot process. This transverse space between the two secondary space, foot process, is called as the filtration slit. The size of which is 20 to 30 nanometer, smaller than the size of the fenestration. So these three structures form the filtration membrane for the glomerular filtration. The recent studies has also shown that these filtration slits are also covered by a small diaphragm, and this diaphragm is formed by one of the protein that is called the nephrin. The name is nephrin. So the barrier is not only this filtration slit along with the diaphragm, we have to say. So sometimes there is a defect in this protein, genetic mutation of the gene which is forming this nephrin protein leads to one of the syndrome called as the congenital nephrotic syndrome. We are going to see about the feature of the nephrotic syndrome later, but for now remember that the defect in the nephrin protein leads to the nephrotic syndrome. So there is the defect in the filtration, so that the molecules which are not supposed to be filtered through the glomerular membrane also filtered. That's why there is the proteinuria and edema also. So here we are going to see about the glomerular basement membrane, really important topic. This is the glomerular capillaries, which is lined by, this is the endothelial cell, and it is the larger view of this endothelial cell lining. This is the basement membrane of the endothelium, where the endothelial cells are resting. So these are the endothelial cells, this region is the basement membrane, and these are the podocyte cells. So this is the all about the filtration membrane. If you see this basement membrane clearly, you will see that the center part of this basement membrane is little bit dense than the peripheral regions. So that's why the central part is called as the lamina densa, and these two are called as the lamina rara. If you see the composition of this basement membrane, you will see that this is composed of type 4 collagen, and type 4 collagen is actually made up of 3 collagen chains, also called the alpha chains, and at the end they have non-collagenous domains, these 3. And it also contain negatively charged molecules. These are the proteoglycans. So basement membrane of the glomerular barrier or filtration membrane is formed by type of collagens and negatively charged proteoglycans. This negatively charged proteoglycans is important because if some molecule that is going to pass through this filtration membrane is negatively charged, that is not going to pass through this membrane easily. There is one syndrome called as the Alport syndrome, where there is a mutation in one of the chain of this alpha chain, that is peculiarly the alpha 5 chains, and this leads to the hematuria, proteinuria, and renal failure. This is the implication of this type of collagens and proteoglycans. Another clinical condition that is called the Goodpasture syndrome, which is featured by hematuria and hemoptosis. There is the formation of the antibody against the glomerular basement membrane. The antibody are formed against the glomerular basement membranes. So basically the antibody is formed against the non-collagenous domains, those round structures at the end of the collagen chains. So antibody is formed, and that antibody which is formed against these antigens, similar type of antigen is also located in the alveolar membranes. So that's why this antibody pass through the circulations and this react with that antigen in the alveolar membranes, and that lead to this syndrome, Goodpasture syndrome. The name is good, but it's bad syndrome. Okay. So anti-glomerular basement membrane antibody also damages the alveolar epithelium. So that's why this syndrome occurs, and the feature by both symptom related with kidney and related with the lung. So hematuria and hemoptosis. Hemoptosis means blood in the cough, and hematuria means blood in the urine. So what is nephrotic syndrome? Nephrotic syndrome is the result of damage or structural damage in the glomerular basement membranes, which increases its permeability. So it has some criteria. So first criteria is proteinuria, protein in the urine more than 3.5 gram per day. Similarly, hypoalbuminemia and edema and dyslipidemia. So whenever there is the leakage in the basement membranes, normally the proteins do not pass through the glomerular basement membrane. But if there is a defect in the basement membrane, the protein pass through the glomerular basement membrane, and we can detect the protein in the urine. That is called the proteinuria. So due to the proteinuria, the level of the albumin in the blood will be less. And there is the edema also and dyslipidemia. So these are the features. Whenever there is a deficiency in the protein, the liver start to form the many proteins and lipoproteins. So, and those lipoproteins causes the increase in this LDL, which is bad lipoproteins. So these are the features of the nephrotic syndromes. So this edema, how this edema occurs in the nephrotic syndromes? Since the blood level of the albumin is or protein is less, so that the oncotic pressure of the blood decreases. So due to the decrease in the oncotic pressures, the water from the vascular system start to leakage inside the tissue space, so that lead to the edema. There is another syndrome called as the nephritic syndrome. What is the difference between nephrotic and nephritic syndromes? Nephrotic syndromes, we have certain criteria which are due to the defect in the glomerular basement membranes. While in the nephritic syndrome is related to the nephritis. Nephritis means inflammation. So inflammation of the glomeruli is the main cause of the nephritic syndromes. So besides the proteinuria and those features, we will also see oliguria, because due to the inflammations the capillaries become congested, and due to which the filtrations become less, so that lead to the oliguria. Similarly, the RBC also leakages into this filtrate, and that lead to the hematuria. So this is the nephritic and nephrotic syndrome. The next important thing is juxtaglomerular apparatus. Apparatus means the different components combinedly form the one functional unit, that is called as the apparatus, and they are lying just side of the glomerulus. That's why the name is juxtaglomerular apparatus. So this is the glomerular capillaries, and this is the Bowman's capsules. So this region is the juxtaglomerular region. So here you can see this is the distal convoluted tubule regions, and three components you will see in the vicinity of this distal convoluted tubules. This is the efferent arteriole. So few of the cells that line the efferent arteriole, cell of the tunica media, they differentiate as a juxtaglomerular cell. This is the one of the component of juxtaglomerular apparatus. And the cells of this distal convoluted tubules forms the macula densa. So some of the cells become little bit elongated in this region, so they are called the macula densa, and they detect the decrease in the sodium content in the renal tubular fluid that is lying inside the distal convoluted tubules, while this JG cell or juxtaglomerular cell detect the decrease in the blood pressures in the efferent arteriole. And there is another, the third cell is the Lassis cell. These are called the mesangial cell also, but this is not inside the glomerulus. This is the extraglomerular mesangial cell, also called as the Lassis cell, the function of which is not properly known. So these two cells are the main components or important component of this juxtaglomerular apparatus. How this apparatus works, we are going to see. So as previously I said that the JG cell or juxtaglomerular cell detect the decrease in the blood pressures. So if there is decrease in the blood pressures, or if there is decrease in the sodium content in the distal convoluted tubule, which is detected by the macula densa cells here. So with this response, the JG cells or juxtaglomerular cell secretes renin. This renin is important for conversion of the angiotensinogens, that is secreted by the liver, into the angiotensin 1. So this step is catalyzed by this renin, and angiotensin 1 is converted into the angiotensin 2 through the angiotensin converting enzyme in the lung. And this angiotensin 2 is very much important for the two purpose. This causes the vasoconstriction, which increases the peripheral resistance obviously, and this also induces the release of the aldosterone secretion from the suprarenal gland, from the zona glomerulosa layer. So what is the function of aldosterone? Aldosterone induces the sodium reabsorption from the renal tubules. When there is a sodium reabsorption in the renal tubules, the water also follow this path, and more water lie in the vascular bed. So this combinedly this increases the blood volume, and this increases the peripheral resistance, vasoconstriction. So we know that blood pressure is equivalent to peripheral resistance times the cardiac output. So whenever blood volume increases, cardiac output increases, and due to vasoconstriction, peripheral resistance also increases. So combinedly they increases the BP. So initially the BP was low. Due to this mechanism, BP is maintained. So this is one of the chief function of the renin-angiotensin system. You must have heard about many drugs that act upon this enzyme also. Some captopril, enalapril, this act upon this enzyme, and so that they inhibit the formation of this angiotensin 2, and that's why they maintain the function as to reduce the blood pressure. So till now we discussed about the renal corpuscle. We see about how the basement membranes is formed, and how renin-angiotensin system act. Now we are going to follow the Bowman's capsule further. So Bowman's capsules are urinary space that is formed between the two layers of Bowman's capsule is joined by the PCT or proximal convoluted tubules. If you see the histological feature of this part of the renal tubules, first of all, it is located in the cortex. The lining epithelium is simple cuboidal epithelium with brush borders. These are the brush borders formed in the cells of the PCT. This brush border is formed by the microvilli, so they are helpful to increase the surface area of these proximal convoluted tubules. And basal striation, you can see here, this striation is due to the rich in the mitochondria because metabolically these cells are very active. Because if you see the reabsorptions in these tubules, around 2/3 of the water and 2/3 of the solutes are reabsorbed in these proximal convoluted tubules. The lumen is irregular. If you see the histological section, we are going to see later. So the fluid that leaves the proximal convoluted tubule is almost isotonic because water and solutes are reabsorbed in equal amount. That's why the osmolarity of the fluid is almost same. Then if you follow the PCT or proximal convoluted tubule, it is continued as a loop of Henle. You will see we just see this loop of Henle as a hairpin band. It has descending limb and ascending limb. So it located in the medulla, mainly in the medulla, but for the cortical nephrons, some part also lies in the cortex. It is lined by simple squamous epithelium in thin part and simple cuboidal epithelium in the thick part. The ascending limb, the upper part of the ascending limb is little bit thicker. The upper part only. This part is thicker, so this part is thinner. So thick part is lined by simple cuboidal as the lining of the PCT, and this thin part is lined by the simple squamous. If you see this diagram, you can see there are the two types of cell here. This is the thick part of the loop of Henle, which is lined by simple cuboidal, and this is the thin part of the loop of Henle. So loop of Henle also reabsorb some of the fluids, but here one thing you have to know is that the ascending limb of the loop of Henle is not permeable to water, not for water, and this descending limb is permeable to the water. In the previous slide, in this slide, we say that the loop of Henle lies in the medulla and they form the medullary rays. What is medullary rays? If you see the macroscopic anatomy of this kidney section, sagittal section of the kidney, you will see that there is the longitudinal lining in the renal pyramid. You will see small lines that line in the renal pyramid. These are called as the medullary rays. These medullary rays are mainly formed by the loop of Henle and collecting duct. If you see the medulla here, these are the loop of Henle and this is the collecting duct. So these two structures are mainly from the medullary rays. Now let's see the distal convoluted tubule, histological feature of the distal convoluted tubules. They are located in the cortex, lined by simple cuboidal epithelium, again like the same as the proximal convoluted tubules, but microvilli are very few, while the PCT has numerous microvilli as a brush border, and size of the cell is also smaller than the proximal convoluted tubules. Because in the histological section you have to differentiate between which one is the PCT and which one is the DCT. So that's why these points are helpful to differentiate between PCT and DCT. Lining is same but microvilli are few, size of the cell is smaller, and perfectly round lumen, while the PCT, the lumen is not perfectly round. And the functional importance is that the parathyroid hormone dependent calcium reabsorption occurs in the DCT. If you see this slide, these are the two structures. These are the same two structures. These are the PCT or DCT. Because the lumen is not perfectly round, so this means that they are the lumen. This is the lumen of the PCT, while this is the DCT, which are the perfectly round lumens. And similarly, the size of the cell is also smaller. So these points are helpful to differentiate between PCT and DCT. Finally, the collecting duct, which is lined by two types of cells, principal cells and intercalated cells. These are the two types of cells lying in the collecting duct. The principal cell are pale cell. Pale means these are not taking so much stain, and the intercalated cell are dark cell. This is the one type of cell. This is the collecting duct, which if you see in the detail, some cells are pale and some are darker one. So these are the principal cell and intercalated cell. Functionally, the principal cell or pale cells contain the aquaporine channels, which are the channel for the reabsorption of the water, and intercalated cells are helpful for the acidification of the urine. So we finish about the histological section of the nephrons, mainly nephrons. So we start from the renal corpuscles and come to the collecting duct. Now the distal portion of the collecting duct open into the tip of the renal papilla, where the minor calyces start, and minor calyces from the major calyces, and major calyces from the renal pelvis, through which ureter started. So now we are going to see about the histological section of the ureter, urinary bladder and urethra. All these structures except for urethra, the general arrangement is the innermost is the mucosal epithelium, which is lined by urothelium. Another name of urothelium is transitional epithelium, and then the next one layer is the lamina propria, the connective tissue layer. Then there is the muscle layer. The muscle layer, the arrangement of the muscle is inner one is the longitudinal and outer one is the circular. So double layer muscles are found, but third layer of the longitudinal muscle is also found, mainly in the bladder and also the part of the ureter which is attached to the bladder. So this is the feature, and outermost covering the connective tissue covering, that is the adventitial layer, also called as the serosal layer. So we are going to see the histological, when we see the histological section, we are going to see these 4 layers from inner side to the outer side. This is the ureter, slide of the ureter. You can see the lumen of the ureter here, and this is the folding of the mucosal lining. So mucosal lining is very much folded. So if you follow these previously named layers, so innermost layer is this mucosal layer. This mucosal layer is the transitional epithelium or urothelium. Then very thin lamina propria found, and mainly you are going to see this muscle layer, and this is the outermost layer, serosal layer. If you see the enlarged view again, you can see this is the transitional epithelium made up of many cell layers. It is not single layer epithelium; it is multiple layer epithelium. So the surface cells are flat, and when you go more deeper, the cells become cuboidal or columnar. And this is the muscle layer. Outer one are the circular muscle, and inner one are the longitudinal group of muscles. And this is the serosal group of serosal layers, outermost layer. Within this muscle layer, you can see different vessels and nerves running within this muscle layer. Now the bladder, urinary bladder. If you see the interior of the urinary bladder, you are going to see two types of region here. This central region, that is called the trigone. This is the smooth region, smooth one, and here you can see the different foldings. If you see the histological section also, you will find that the trigone, the layers, the histological layer, if you see, there is the uniform thickness you will found in the trigone region, while the thickness vary in the remaining part of the bladder. This is the interior side of the bladder again. The muscle layer that forms the bladder are called the detrusor muscle. So those detrusor muscle become thick in the lower part of the urinary bladder, in this neck region of the urinary bladder, where they form the sphincter. This is called the internal urethric sphincter. In this region, they form the internal urethric sphincter, that is formed by the thickening of the detrusor muscles. And the urine that is released from this bladder comes to the urethra here, and this is the prostate. So this part of the urethra is called as the prostatic urethra. And later we are going to see that this urethra also shares the similar type of feature as that of the urinary bladder. So this part is also lined by the similar type of epithelium also. Okay, this is the histological section of the urinary bladder. If you see the urinary bladder, you can notice that these are very much thick muscle layer. This is the muscle layer, thicker muscle layer, also called the detrusor muscles. This much thicker. This structure, what is this structure? This is the structure that open into the urinary bladder. So this is passing through the muscle layer of the urinary bladder. So this is the ureter, where you can also see the lining of the transitional epithelium. And this is the luminal aspect of the urinary bladder lined by the again the urothelium or transitional epithelium. These are the two histological diagrams showing the different functional aspect of the urinary bladder. So when the urinary bladder is empty, you can see that the mucosal layer is very much folded and thickness is also much thicker. But when it is full, the mucosal epithelium stretches and it becomes very much thin. Finally, let's see about the urethra. Here I have shown the male urethra, which is constituted of the prostatic urethra, membranous urethra, and spongy urethra. The prostatic urethra has the similar type of lining as that of the urinary bladder because it is the most proximal part of the urethra, which is continue as a uh, urinary bladder from the neck of the urinary bladder. That's why it shares the similar lining called as the transitional epithelium. While the membranous part of the urethra, it passes through the deep perineal pores, but it has the lining is pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. The spongy urethra is the part of the urethra which lies within the penis. It has the lining is the proximal part is lined by the pseudo-stratified epithelium and distal part is lined by the stratified squamous epithelium. The female urethra is very much short, so it has the lining. The proximal part is lined by the transitional epithelium, and the distal part is lined by the stratified squamous epithelium. So with this, we finish the microanatomy of the urinary system. In the system, first of all, you have to know what is the key epithelial lining of the urinary system is transitional epithelium, which we call the urothelium also. But if you see the nephrons part of the kidney, nephron, which are the structural and functional unit of the kidney, the epithelial lining of those tubular system is different than the excreted part of the kidney. So there we see mainly the cuboidal epithelium, and in the loop of the Henle we see the squamous type of the epithelium. With this, I finished my discussion. Thank you for listening, and I hope you will stay home and stay safe.